Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to Swift Slots. And right at the top of this video, I'd like to give a huge thank you to Pendle Slot Racing for making it possible for me to have this car in my collection, because without their help, there was just no way I would ever get my hands on this car. So thank you, Pendle Slot Racing. So what is this car? This car is a Le Mans Miniatures Renault Espace F1. Now I got to find out about this car, like many other people, in the end of the 1990s when Gran Turismo 2 brought this car out as a very special car that you could only get after a lot of racing and getting a lot of money. I think it was 2 million credits or something like that you had to earn to be able to buy this car from the Renault garage. But when you did, this car was a monster. It absolutely howled around the track and it annihilated everything else out there. It was an amazing car. However, I stopped racing console games in about the mid-noughties, so this car for me just became a distant memory, and an amazing memory it was, until the other day when I saw Pendle Slot Racing's Facebook page and I saw this car on there and I thought, I gotta have that. That's amazing, because I love this car in the game. I just had to have it. Unfortunately, I then saw the price. A little bit prohibitive for me. But the thing is with Le Mans Miniatures, they are hand-finished models. And I've been over this model and I can tell you they are a cut above the rest of all the other cars. Yes, they're a little bit pricey, but you really understand why they're pricey when you actually start looking at them in close detail compared to just about anything else that I've seen in slot cars. There's another little sting in the tail with this car, because the price that you see for this car isn't actually a slot car price, it's actually a static car price. So you have to buy a 3D printed chassis from Le Mans Miniatures as a pack as well, and then you've got to buy gear on top of that. So the whole car works out to be about £165, I guess it's about $180. It's a lot of money. It's a very niche market, but it is a beautiful, beautiful model. And if you could see the model yourselves in your hand, you'd understand. It's got a quality about it that you just cannot get in any other slot car that I have found. So what I want to do is get you on my table and show you this car in extreme detail. There's also another Renault Espace F1 to buy in the Le Mans Miniatures range, and I want to show you the differences between that car and this car. Then I've also bought the 3D chassis for it and the gear. So I'm going to show you exactly how to change the chassis on this car to turn it from a static model into a fully working slot car. Then we'll take it on Crow Valley and I will be driving it around very, very gently, because I do not want this car to roll over or scratch or damage in any way, because it's an amazing model. It'd be a shame to scratch it and it costs a fortune. So we'll be gently driving it around Crow Valley just so that you can see what she looks like running around the track. So let's get you on my table, let's show you this car in extreme detail and we'll crack on with it. Okay, I'm not a huge fan when YouTubers start reviewing boxes of the product that they're reviewing, but quality is worthy of note. And this box has got quality in spades and it is worthy of note. So this box actually weighs 466 grams, which is almost half a kilo. So it's worthy of note. So the first thing you see is you get this lovely black card sleeve, and it's proper, decent quality cardboard. It's not all flimsy, it's a proper quality piece of card. And then that reveals this beautifully printed hard card box, very similar to the Revo slots. Really high quality cardboard box with very, very nice printing on all sides. So then we lift off the lid and we're presented with a very nice leaflet on the Le Mans Miniatures products. And it's very, very nicely printed. Shows you all the little miniatures that they do and a lot of the cars that they do. And it's an extremely nice little book to go thumbing through. It's really nicely presented. So that's what you get there. And then you get this nice piece of tissue which protects the top of the car from any scratches. And then you start to see something a little bit interesting. You have this little tab here. So you can fold down the front of the box and then you pull the tab and it reveals the car on a little slide out tray, which is really, really nice touch. I say the inside of the box is all printed as well, which gives the whole car a real feel of quality. So we take the box out and the packaging doesn't stop there, because the car comes presented on this nice card, and it's not just thin card, it's a really thick double lined card with the silver all the way around the inside and this nice little pull tab That's a nice piece of material. Remove before run, it says, which is cool. And then on the actual base here, we got a really nice 3D elevated resin Le Mans Miniatures emblem. And then the sticker showing you what car you have. So here is the car in all its glory. I'll give you a quick walk around it here now, showing you the car. And it's absolutely stunning in my opinion. This is a really, really nice piece. Now, as I understand it, this body is resin, so it's not the lightest car in the world, but it's more for looks than anything else in my opinion. So as I said to you, there's actually two of these cars in real life. You've got the non-running car, which is ironically the one we used to race in Gran Turismo. And then you have the running version, which is the one that I've got here. And they're very easy to tell apart. The running version has these plain wheels and the non-running version has the aero disc wheels. So there are a number of differences between these two cars. So I'll run you through those differences now. So the running car has got these spoked wheels and the non-running car has got the aero disc wheels. Now, I believe that these are exactly the same wheels in real life, but one's with the discs and one's without the discs. So what you would see underneath the non-running car with the aero disc wheels would be these wheels anyway. But with the running car, they've taken those discs off, probably for cooling of the brakes to allow more air through the wheel, probably. So the other differences between the two is you've got a little sticker here on the rear view mirror. That's not on the non-running version. You've also got a pair of windscreen wipers on the non-running version, whereas this car only has the one wiper. Sadly, my car didn't turn up with any wipers whatsoever. It's a missing part, so that's a bit unfortunate, but this car should have one windscreen wiper. You've also got, for the running car, this one, you've got two bonnet latches because the car used to run, so it would need to have the bonnets locked down. You've also got a very, very different front grille on this running version. So you've got two great big radiators that are really nicely modelled on the front there. And you've got a great big hole in the middle for the air to be ducted straight through to the carburetors which sit between the rear seats. You've also got these ducts on the side on the running version because the air will go into the radiators on either side, cool the fluids, and then the hot air would be vented out the side. Now that isn't on the non-running version, only on this running version. You've also got a towing eye on the front of this running version, which isn't on the non-running version. On the sides, I think they're pretty much exactly the same, apart from you got lights on the rear wing for the non-running car, and the back ends are exactly the same. And while we're on the back end, just take a look at that defrosting. I'm hoping that's coming out in the camera, but those defrosting ribs across the back there, absolutely superb. And the incredibly fine rear view wiper, absolutely stunning. And then on the roof, we got a little bit of difference again. Now you've got two air ducts here, which are not on the non-running version, only the running version, and they are to duct air down to the rear brakes. But also, a little bit of interest, the ducting is actually reproduced on the inside of this car as well. And it'd be easier to see when I take the body off, but there's actual ducts that run down on the inside of the body as well as the scoops on the roof to take the air down to the back discs, and that isn't present on the non-running model. So also this particular running version, you've got black seats, whereas the non-running version hasn't got black seats, it's got yellow seats. You've also got a civilian driver in the running car, whereas you've got a racing driver in the non-running car, which is again a little bit ironic. Also, on the non-running car, you can actually see the carburetors between the seats and the injection rail going across the carburetor intakes, whereas on this running version, that's all closed over between the seats and you can't see it. Whereas on this running version, you can see the actual suspension in the back end, whereas you can't see that on the non-running version. All you see is just a little tiny slit with a hint of some suspension shock absorbers in the back there, whereas this particular version you can see all of the detail. And again, I'll take the body off in a minute and you can see that. And I think that is most of the differences between the two. So there are quite a few differences between these two cars, but none of them really make that much difference overall visually. They're both incredibly good looking cars. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the body off and then I shall show you the insides. So just before I actually take the body off, I'll show you the underside of the car as well. There's very little to see, but you do see the rear exhaust outlets. There's also a little outlet here. It can't be an exhaust. I don't actually know what it is, but it's a bit too small to be an exhaust pipe. So I'm guessing that these are the actual exhaust pipes. Right, there's 6 screws on this car to remove to get the body off. So let's get those off now. So there we are. There's the 6 screws removed. And we gently prise away the chassis. And then we have the interior. So if I lift the interior out very, very carefully. There we are. Right, out he comes. So here is the interior. So you can see these seats are actually dark blue, and all the seat belts and buckles are all represented here, apart from the rear ones, it would have seemed. And there's your civilian driver. And there is the suspension all on show in the back of the car, with some really, really nice 3-dimensional detail there. Now, there's another difference here. This section here between the seats on the non-running version is actually open, and you can see the trumpets of the carburetors and also the fuel rails that run right across the top of the trumpets as well, whereas that isn't present on this running version, which is a little bit strange, but that's the way it was, and that is the way it is on the models. So that's your interior, and here is the inside of the body. And again, you can see, as I explained to you earlier on, you can actually see the ducting here coming down from the roof to what would be the rear wheels for the cooling of the brakes, and that is all represented on this model, where it isn't on the actual non-running version because it wouldn't need to its brakes cooling because they're not doing anything. But it's also worthy of note, this got the entire roll cage all modelled as well, which is really, really nice to see. You've also got some very nice detail on the inside of these panels here, and also the dashboard's all in there. And you'll notice that there's a little, or you may not notice actually, but there's a little tiny instrument panel right in the middle of that dashboard. I hope that's going to see in the camera, but maybe not. And that is actually as it was in real life. It's just little tiny display. That's all it had, because the whole dashboard was carbon fiber on the original, and all it had was a little tiny readout in the middle of the dashboard. You can also see the back side of the radiators here. Even the back sides that you don't ever see unless you lift the body off are actually louvered there. You can actually see the little louvers there, which is absolutely amazing. So there's the interior all in there as well. And the chassis, very, very simple chassis. There's not a lot going on here. It's nicely reinforced, but it's only as a static model, so it doesn't really mean a huge amount. But there it is anyway. But also you'll notice it's actually got alloy wheels, which is really a really nice feature, both front and rear alloy wheels. So if you want to turn it into a slot car, what parts do you need? Well, first of all, you need an offset crown gear from Slot It at 25 teeth. So that's the part you need there, GO25-BZ. So that's what you're going to need as well as this 3D printed chassis kit for your Espace. And there we are, 32 as indicated there. So what do we get for our 30 odd pounds as a 3D printed kit? Well, we get a 3D printed chassis. We also get a motor. We get some bearings, and we get a guide. So, and we get a pinion, it would seem. So here we are. So we get a slim can motor, which is a rather strange choice. I don't actually know what RPM it is, but what I'll do is I'll put my RPM meter on this and I'll test it and I'll find out what RPM, and I'll put it just here. So we'll find out what that is. We get a rather nice guide. Now I've got to admit, I've got a bit of conflict here. I do like my Slotting Plus guides, and I'm torn as to whether I should fit this one or fit my Slotting Plus guide. I guess I should fit this one, shouldn't I really? But here is the 3D printed chassis. That piece there, I'm guessing, is probably not supposed to be there, but I'll leave it there. I can always remove it if it's not supposed to be there. But it's really, really high quality, really stiff, and you cannot see any ley lines in this at all. It's a very, very nice quality piece. Really, really good. So there we are. You get yourself a standard pinion, which is not very interesting. You get yourself some standard plastic bearings as well, and then a screw to hold your guide on. Again, not very interesting, but that's what you get. So what we'll do now is we will put all of these chassis parts, so all of them, is only the wheels, onto our 3D printed chassis, and then we'll get this car turned into a slot car. Okay, so here are the parts you're going to need to build up your chassis. But before we do that, there's just a few things I want to bring to your attention before we actually start the build. The first of those is the things you actually need to finish the build. So within the kit, you're going to need extra parts again, other than the gear. You're going to need a pair of braids for your front guide. You're also going to need a pair of ferrules for your guide as well. You're also going to need to supply your own silicone wire for your motor. Now there's one other thing that I've noticed on my particular kit, is my front tyre is actually split quite badly. I don't know if you can see that. So that's something that is of note. And it's also cracked right through the actual water slide. So that's not great, but something you need to be aware of. Also, I found that I've needed to make a longer axle for my kit because the standard axle is just too short, and I can show you that here. So if I take my body, turn it upside down gently, and put the back wheels into the arches like that. There, now they are nice and tight to the inside of the body. And if I take my standard axle that came with the kit, which measures basically 49mm, and I put that over those grub screws on those alloy wheels, you can see that I'm not even making it past those grub screws. So that is just too short. It's alright for a static model because it's just gripping the wheels by a couple of mil, but for a slot car that's not going to work. So what I've done is I've made myself another 332 axle, and I made it to 53.5mm. So now that is just about the right amount to get onto those alloy wheels and past those grub screws nicely. You've also got to be aware that you've got wheel inserts here, so you can't push the axles all the way through. You can go in about 6mm. So 53.5mm for a new axle is exactly where you need to be. I've tested it and that is the right size. So with all that said, it's now time to start building the actual chassis. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is check the fit up of your 3D printed chassis into your body itself. Now I've actually found that it fits very, very nicely, bar a couple of little issues. There's a little half moon on both sides of the inside of those wheel arches there. They actually get in the way, and if you look on the standard chassis, those little half moons are not present, and if you put the original chassis back into the body, you find that they're nice and flush to the inside. And having test fitted these front wheels, they need every single bit of that clearance. As you can see, they barely miss the inside of those wheel arches, yet they're right on the very limits of the body. So you just can't have those little half moons, so they need to go. Also, I've noticed that the inside of these little swells that hold the inside of the screws are also just hanging up. It fits beautifully there, if you can see, but on that side there it doesn't fit. There's a little bit of a gap. So what you need to do is trim away just the ever so slight edges of those little ovals there. Just trim away about 1mm on both sides and you'll be clear. The other thing I've noticed is that you've got two little hooks on the back of the chassis here, which are actually present sort of on the back of my original one, but they don't quite fit inside the body if you don't take a Dremel to the inside of those little uprights and just nibble them back just a hair. If you do that, those little tips of the chassis there, they then nip in really, really nicely, and they fit exactly as they should do, just like that. So there's a little tiny bit of trimming that you need to do before you can actually get going with the chassis. So let's trim the front now and just knock those ovals back, and then we can think about getting the back axle in. And there we are. That's the chassis all fitting really, really nicely, and it's nice and flush on the inside of the front arches, and the wheels clear really, really well, and the back end is clipped in as it should be. Right, so that's it. So that's the chassis now trimmed. Now it's time we can get the back axle in. So all we do for that, we just liberate the bearings from the little sprue. We can clip them in nice and simply, just like so. And then all we need to do then is just make sure they're nicely lined up just by jiggling them around, and make sure that they're all seated exactly where they should be and the axle is nice and free to turn, which it is, and there we are. That's absolutely fine. So next job is to get the pinion in. So for the pinion you'll need a 0.9mm Allen key, and that goes in there just like that. I guess I better tidy up this mess before we progress. Okay, so once you've got your back axle in and your gear in and you're happy that it's all free to turn, you need to fit your rear wheels. Now I've noticed with these rear wheels, one of mine is very easy to go on the axle and the other one is quite stiff to go on, so you need to just be aware that you may need to push with a little bit of force. And also another thing to note is that you'll need a 0.9mm Allen key of the standard Allen key type. You cannot actually use one of these standard drivers because the shaft is too thick. So the way that I do it, just pop the wheel on, do up the sides that's nice and easy, and then push the other side on with all your might until it goes nice and deep and you've got exactly the right distance between the wheels. It might take a little bit of pushing. Mine is quite firm, so you need to give it a good old push and double check as you go against your chassis to make sure that it's clearing the inside of the wheel arches. So there we are, mine's in there, a little bit stiff there, and that's it, that's probably about right. So once you get to that point, just double check it in your body and make sure that everything is clearing as it should do, which it pretty much is. So we're good to go. We can tighten up those grub screws now, and then we can get these rear tyres back on the chassis. And there we are. After a little bit of adjustment, I've gotten that much side float in my back axle, but the wheels are absolutely flush to the outside of the body and the wheels are nice and free to turn. And the actual measurement on the backs of the wheels measures 41.9mm. That's the distance you need between the back of the wheels to get them to clear the arches nicely and also not extend beyond the actual bodywork. And as you can see, that's nice and free to turn now. So we're now ready to fit the actual motor and pinion. Okay, fitting the motor and pinion is exactly the same as any other slot car. You just place the pinion on the end of the motor the best you can, just to try and get it to hold on the motor, and then you can put it in your little pinion press and then you can press the pinion on. And there we are. Once you've got the motor on, once you've got the pinion on the motor, you can then offer it into the car and test fit it until you get just the right amount of pinion position. Now I think that's just about perfect, and as you can see I've got about 0.5 millimeter gap between the pinion and the motor. But before I clip the motor in, I think I'm going to solder on my wires onto the motor in readiness, because once it's clipped into the chassis it's a little bit close to these little side intakes, so just to be safe I'll solder the motor's wires on right now. Now just before I go and solder the wires on, I just wanted to show you something that I've noticed on this pinion that may or may not be of importance. There's a little tiny, and I don't think you're going to be able to see it, there's a little tiny sprue on the back of this pinion that appears to be like a depth stop for the gap behind the pinion. Now I think that I need to go just a hair further than that little pip there. Now that may just be a moulding flash or it may be a guide, but whatever it is, I'm going to chop it off and I'm going to move the pinion back just another 1/10 of a millimeter because I think that's what it needs. But just in case that little pip there is actually a proper guide, just take note that it might be worth just double checking before you go chopping it off. But I'm going to chop mine off and move my pinion back about another 1/10 of a mil because I think that's where it needs to be. Okay, so once you've soldered on your wires, you're ready to fit the motor. And I must like this car because I've actually fitted heat shrink to my motor for the first time in a long time, but there you are. So my advice would be slacken off your gear so it's nice and loose, and you can get your motor in exactly the right position and then clip him in just like that. And then once you're happy that everything is all as it should be, you can roughly size up your axle, roughly where you think it might be. Give it a little gentle nip, nothing too mad. Make sure that it all turns nice and free, and then you can offer it into the body. Just like that. And then check the wheel width, and if it's absolutely spot on, that's great. And if it's not, you can simply rotate the gear around to the window and you can slacken off the grub screw, and then you could just get your back axle exactly where it needs to be, and then you can give them a little bit of a nip up, and then you're actually done. And that's the chassis, or the back end of the chassis at least, already done. Okay, so next you're going to want to fit your guide. So I found that my guide in my chassis is a little bit on the tight side. It's just a bit tighter than I would like. So what I'm going to do is just file the top of this hole until I get the fitment of my guide spot on. And there we are. That's not too bad at all. It's not tight, but it's not loose. It's just right. So once you've got to the point that you're happy, put the plastic washer on the top of your guide and then pop your screw in the top and do it up nice and gently. You don't need to go mad. There's no need to go over the top. So that will be just about perfect. And there we are. So that's not a bad fitting guide. It runs really nicely. So all you need to do then is just wire up your braids in the normal way that you would do any slot car, and that'll be almost it. And there we are, all done. All very basic standard slot car stuff, nothing special. So all that's left to do now is place the interior back into the body like that. Place your front wheels in the holder, and then pop the chassis in from the back forwards. Because of the little lugs at the back, they just need to be located just like that. And then all you got to do then is just pop in the 6 screws and you're done. Okay, well I thought it was all going to go together nicely. I was getting some interference problems between the gear and the motor, so I've put some paint on the gear and the motor, and I've got some paint transfer onto the underside of the interior. So I'm just going to go away now and I'll Dremel out that and I'll get it to clear, and then we'll come back and put the chassis on the body. Okay, so after a couple of minutes of clearancing with the Dremel, I've managed to get the body to fit nicely, and need to take a little bit of extra resin out of here and here just to clear the tops of the bearing housings. Had to take away a little bit of resin in there to clear for the top of the gear, and I've had to lower down where the motor goes by about another 1.5 mm, and it's just started to break through on the floor, but it's really not going to notice because it's inside nice and dark. And on the inside of the body, I just needed to clearance just a little tiny scallop on the inside of the arches here, just to clear the tops of the bearings as well. It does actually say somewhere, I've noticed, that if you want to get this powered chassis into this car, you will need to do a little bit of fettling here and there, and that has been the case here, but it's nothing too dramatic. So now I've done that work, now we can actually get the chassis back into this car and actually put it on the turntable. Okay, so now we're finished on the bench and we're ready to hit the track. What are my closing thoughts on turning this decorative car into a slot car? Well, it's not actually quite as straightforward as just buying the chassis, because you do have to do a little bit of clearancing on the underside of that interior to make it fit. And I did find that I needed to replace that back axle for a slightly longer one. And as I showed you earlier on, you do need to add a couple of extra bits of your own, like the wire and the braid and so on. Also, my advice to you would be, if you're doing one of these, is to take off the tyres and put them somewhere safe until you're finished, because with all the handling of fitting the chassis, I did actually find I ended up rubbing off most of the lettering on one of these rear tyres, which is a little bit disappointing. Also, you really want to watch the splitting tyres, because although I've glued my tyre up just here and it seems to be holding for now, I have noticed that there is actually a split starting to happen in the back tyre just around there, so that's not going to last too long. Obviously you can buy new tyres for these cars, they're just standard slot car tyres, but you will lose that nice printing when you have to change the tyres, which is a bit of a pity, because this car is very, very nice and it's made better by the wheel printing. But that said, let's get her on the track to see what she looks like. And there we are, all the ins and outs of this incredible model now converted into a slot car made by Le Mans Miniatures and supplied to me by Pendle Slot Racing of the UK. Now if you're interested in oddball cars like this, I would highly recommend you go over to the Le Mans Miniatures website. They've got an incredible range of cars there and a really nice range of figurines as well. So if you've enjoyed this sort of content, maybe you'd subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.